Can we please not do the unnecessary backstory thing?
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City and beyond. She's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
Okay.
As I usually say, existing, persisting,
resisting.
There's the third one. That one's good. Well, you look good. Hey, and I have Batman Blue on. So for folks who are watching us on our video podcast, you can see my Batman collectibles behind me. And then I decided to get a little in the theme.
And by the way, that's only a small handful of your Batman collectibles.
There's a lot of Batman Blue in my landscape here.
There is. Where can people see these videos?
I was actually just going to ask you that because I technically may not know, because I do not keep track of these things these days. Yeah. If folks want to watch our video podcast, where do they go?
Patreon.com/Arkham Sessions. One of the tiers allows you to actually view these video versions of the podcast a full season early. Otherwise, you can see last season's videos podcast on YouTube. Just go to the Arkham Sessions. We've got episode 7 of Harley Quinn available on Max. This one is called The Line, and it specifically relates to the line that has to be drawn between what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do in order to achieve greatness. And in this case, it's the greatness that makes her worthy enough to become a member of that one society that she just desperately wants to get into, the Legion of Doom.
So, and I think that we're definitely going to get into it, especially around what the line means.
Yeah.
But she wants to get into a club of villains.
Yes.
And as we've learned, this is the Joker, the Riddler, Bane, Maxie Zeus, which I think is one of the worst of them. These are folks who seem to not have a line. They will do anything and everything to get ahead, to get what they want. There's, as I mentioned in our holiday poem, there is a lot of narcissism. There is a lot of self-centeredness. There's, big egos, some personality disorders that we're seeing.
We're still talking about the show, right?
Yes.
Oh, got it.
We're talking about,
Sorry.
Oh boy, we're talking about the folks in the Harley Quinn animated show, season 1, 2020.
Got it.
Just to be clear. But yes, I know we'll get to a point where Harley will reflect on the characteristics and values that these people have and wonder, is this a club I really want to be a part of? And
right.
This is the episode where we start to see a little bit of that shine come through, that little glimmer of not self-doubt so much as authenticity coming through. Because up till now, we've seen her struggle with ideas like, I would call them schema even. These are deep-rooted themes around herself and others. And right now, she's starting to question one of the big ideas that she's been carrying, which is, in order to be valuable in the society, I have to be just like these other villains.
Yeah.
And in this episode, she's learning that these other villains really, don't have any moral compass.
Right.
And that's what the line is about. I interpreted the line being her sense of morality and how that relates to who she is as a person.
Yeah, it's the same. It's finding perspective in seeing things you hadn't seen before, thinking you're the biggest, baddest, and then suddenly being introduced to someone who is clearly bigger and badder than you, and questioning whether you're willing to go to those lengths in order to be considered a supervillain, especially for the motives that she has to become a supervillain.
Right.
You know, as we've discussed, becoming the supervillain isn't as important to her as it is rubbing it into the face of all of these other supervillains in Gotham, specifically the Joker. But the others have certainly tried to put her in her place throughout these first 6 episodes. So at this point, she's kind of got this vendetta. She needs to become a part of this so that she can show them that as a woman, she is good enough to be a member of this exclusive club.
And we've seen her take on the style of thinking, the methods, even trying to embrace some of the behaviors and ideas and ways in which these villains would act. And that's when she starts to question whether she's really one of them.
Yeah.
And I think, too, we're going to see as she starts to feel more misaligned with them, something that often happens, at least in therapy, is, once you start this individuation process, you start to wonder, well, then, like, what am I about? What do I care about? What are my core values? What schema am I developing to replace these older ones? And a part of me wishes she had a therapist to work with her on some of these questions.
Instead, she has the next best thing, which is Poison Ivy.
Yeah, who's great.
Someone who is going to constantly call her out and call her in and cause her to reflect on herself. Because as we know, Harley is a former psychologist herself. And therefore, when given the evidence, Harley has a tendency to do that self-reflection and realize, I do have a line. This is what I am not willing to do in order to achieve this goal. However, she still manages to find ways around it. So in the same way that Batman has a line, he will pummel you to near death and then throw you into prison or Arkham, but he will never kill you. And sometimes that bites him in the butt, particularly when we're talking about the mega super villains of Gotham, the Rogues Gallery.
They actually bite him in the butt.
Sometimes. But simply by constantly escaping and doing more harm, constantly getting out of prison for one technicality or another, continuing to do more harm. That's what I mean by that. But he does have a line he will not cross. He is willing to go further than most heroes are in the DC universe, but he's still not willing to go that far in most incarnations. And Harley is now discovering what it means to be a villain and whether there should be a line at all. And actually, that brings up an interesting question, because as we were watching the show, I was wondering really more about her team. Clayface. I'm not going to throw Poison Ivy in there. She's sort of ancillary. She's on the side of the team. But when you've got Dr. Psycho, Clayface, King Shark, I find myself wondering if any of these 3 people, even Dr. Psycho, if they actually want to be villains, or if they just want to be part of something, if they just want to be part of a community. Clayface doesn't really seem to care as long as he's involved.
As long as he has opportunities to perform.
Yes. He could be a hero. He could be a villain. It really doesn't matter. In fact, I don't even think he necessarily needs to be either of those. If he were on a stage or on a TV show or in a movie, he'd be perfectly happy doing all of that. King Shark also just kind of wants to be involved. And then when you look at Dr. Psycho, he has been rejected from the other villains. And he's certainly, as far as morality goes, further down the line of villainhood than any of the others. But we've also managed to get glimpses of the fact that he does have a moral code. Some of the bad things he does are for what he would consider good reasons. And I don't mean that from like a psychopath's perspective of I'm doing these bad things because it benefits me necessarily. Right. But like even the way that we saw in a previous episode, the way that he treats his own family is with the twisted implication that like I'm doing this so that you become a better version of yourself and of me, you know, whatever. So it's weird. Harley is the only one hell bent on becoming a member of the Legion of Doom. And even her reasons aren't the same as the other people who are members of the Legion of Doom, if that makes sense.
It does.
But what it made me think about were sort of these other people, because they follow. They're not quite like Poison Ivy in that they don't call her out on the shenanigans because they want to be part of the shenanigans, but they're also not villains. This is not a villainous version of Clayface. This is not a villainous version of King Shark. We have seen those, and this ain't them. Mm-hmm. So I find it interesting that Harley, while she was sort of partnered up with this group of people because they were the only ones she could get, they were the rejects, if you will, she has still managed to surround herself with people who have a moral compass and are just sort of inherently good-natured people for the most part.
I want to kind of unpack that a little bit because she does say on this episode that she's not a bad person.
Yeah.
She's a bad guy. Is that the language? Like, I'm a villain, I'm not a bad person.
Right.
And I think there's a spectrum of villains here in this
I think
universe.
she said, at the end she says, I'm a bad guy, not a bad person.
How do you interpret that? Because it sounds like the same thing, but I know she means something different.
Yeah, I mean, no, she is talking about the fact that, yes, I do crime, but I'm not a monster. You know, I'm not, I mean, I wouldn't put her, she's not, we're not talking Jean Valjean, this isn't I stole a loaf of bread in order to feed my family situation.
Who is that? Who are you referencing?
Les Mis?
Okay, I've never seen that.
Really, she's not part of this bigger story. Like, she's still doing frivolous things with her villainy.
See. She's not like a Robin Hood.
Correct. She's not doing it for those purposes. You know, she will steal the sarcophagus of King Tut, but only to use it as furniture.
And this is the episode where Poison Ivy makes clear, I'm not even one of you. Yeah. In terms of the spectrum that I referred to, Poison Ivy, who we've always called a villain, who is one of the main rogues in the Batman universe, says in plain English, like, you are different. I only am I cause disruption in order to protect plant life.
Yeah.
And she doesn't even, as we've talked about before, she doesn't call herself an eco-terrorist. She believes that's a word that doesn't necessarily describe her sense of attitude and values around this, that she actually believes she's doing good things.
Yeah.
And when called upon,
I think most eco-terrorists do. It's society that places that label on them, not, they don't call themselves eco-terrorists.
I don't know, some might.
They might.
Yeah.
But those are the people who are more like Queen of Fables.
Yes.
Who we can definitely talk about. But as you were talking, Poison Ivy, she's got her own beeline, storyline in this particular episode. So I'll be interested to talk about her a little bit more in depth because she has to do a little self-reflection of her own. We should start with the plot of this particular episode. I feel like we've gotten ahead of it a little bit. Queen of Fables, who we know was transformed by Zatanna into a book of tax codes for 30 years as punishment for her crimes, is basically told that she is being set free. And over the last, bit of the season, Queen of Fables, as this book of tax codes, has been kind of mentoring Harley. Harley looks up to her and decides that she's a good friend. And when she feels that a disservice has been done, a lack of justice in that Zatanna removes the curse from her, brings her back to her human form, the judge then says, oh no, we remove you from the curse of being a book of tax codes, but you're going to spend the rest of your sentence, probably life, in Arkham Asylum. So basically it was a kind of a bait and switch, literally. Like we have lured you in, we have switched you from tax codes to human being, but you're not actually being set free. And Harley believes that this is an injustice, that she deserves better. She sets her free, and realizes only later that this was a mistake. Poison Ivy, on the other hand, knew from the very beginning, if there's anyone who belongs in a prison, it's Queen of Fables. We should say that Queen of Fables has the ability, she's got a magic book of fairy tales, and she is able to call out anything from that book into the real world to do her bidding. So she will call forth... what was it? Cinderella's mouse. Cinderella's mouse is called forth to help them steal a weather machine. He basically becomes a member of the French Resistance from World War II, strapped with bullet bandoliers and a beret, and he's smoking cigarettes, human-sized cigarettes, unfiltered, as King Shark points out later. And becomes this sort of mercenary for hire. She also brings out the big bad wolf in order to slaughter an entire family at their family reunion picnic, because a couple of those people saw them going in to this facility. She also mentions that the three blind mice can also eat people. The three little pigs also can eat people. So basically all of these fairy tale characters are being used for the most graphic, gory, insane, villainous means.
And pretty heartless. So
Yes.
many innocent people. The family reunion you mentioned is like an extended family reunion. There's dozens of people in the park just playing frisbee and having hamburgers, and
they're all wearing matching t-shirts.
Yeah, it's sad that, you know, you see the difference between Harley and the Queen of Fables, where Harley will just ignore them and hope that she can, you know, still try to steal this. What is it? The weather machine.
Yeah, it's the weather machine that the other villains within the Legion of Doom have tried to steal before, but they've always been... they've always failed. And so she's decided she's going to do the one thing.
Well, she does it with the least harm. And I wonder if some of her experiences from her previous job, being a counselor and taking the oath, right? Doing no harm, or at least trying to minimize harm. The Queen of Fables is totally the opposite of her in that she will engage in extreme violence just to protect herself, and, you know, just to be thorough with this particular mission. So, you know, one can say it's effective. One can say that's what a villain does. But Harley's noticing that they are very different just in terms of their methods.
Yeah. If you've ever needed to showcase what it means to be a villain in order to get someone to maybe rethink their plans of becoming a villain, Queen of Fables is a pretty good person to point to. And so once Harley sees these atrocities, she then realizes, oh, I'm not that person. I do have a line. And what's interesting is Queen of Fables comes right out and says, oh, you've got a line? Villains don't have lines. Heroes have lines they won't cross. There's nothing I won't do to get what I want or what I've set out to accomplish. And I think that might be maybe one of the better definitions of villainy in the Gotham universe. Would you think?
I think so. I would actually argue that they have some form of a line. It just depends on, I think it goes back to their methods. It goes back to, in what way do they indulge in this self-serving villainy, and that's where the line would come from. It's really contextualized in their personality, their way of thinking, in some ways I'd say their pathologies.
Yeah.
And so someone like the Joker, for instance, has a really interesting way of bringing people in and forming close relationships only to then abuse and harm and abandon. That's kind of his style. So while he doesn't necessarily have a line, he has a pattern.
Right.
So everyone has a pattern, but do they have a line? Is there anything that I would say his line has a lot to do with his ego. He wouldn't do anything that would embarrass him. He wouldn't do something that would undermine his brilliance and his control.
And he won't let you do anything.
Absolutely.
That crosses that line either.
Yeah. So it's sort of, I'm cheating a little bit in that I'm putting a lot of lines, a lot of different types of lines, I guess, in the mix. But I think many of them do have lines. But as far as the line around harm, no, I think Harley is introducing an idea that is unique to villains, which is I won't purposefully harm innocent people.
Well, and
I
that's
have no reason to do that.
I think that is the main point. We have seen Harley abuse a lot of people. We have seen her maim and kill. I mean, her introduction was using the mallet to, knock people's bones out of their legs and all of that on a ship deck. Those were presumably innocent people, but they were a means to an end. What she's not going to do is slaughter an entire family, the Praxis family, Jason Praxis's family. Jason Praxis, by the way, is a real character in the DC universe. No, he's not. He was a police detective who has when you look at him, you can kind of see that's like, that's the police detective type. The sunglasses, the long ponytail, the jacket with the collar flipped up. His powers were more sort of telepathy and telekinesis based.
Okay.
I'm not super familiar with Praxis, but I don't remember the sort of lightning stuff that we saw at the end of this particular episode, but I could be wrong. I mean, they explained too how he got that. He hid because he couldn't help his family being slaughtered by the big bad wolf, and then grabbed hold of the fence around the power plant and electrocuted himself and ended up getting these new powers. But yes, that character is a real character in the DC universe.
Interesting. Well, we should probably mention that he's the only surviving member of this family. Everyone gets slaughtered in these horrific ways.
Because she says, Queen of Fables says, you've got to take out the bloodline. You cannot allow for anyone to come back for revenge later, which of course happens.
So it's I guess he calls himself Mr. Praxis. Is that right?
Well, he is
something happens in that disaster.
Yeah.
So this is an event that obliterates his entire family, but he ends up touching an electric fence or something electrified. And so he gains these superpowers and he channels his vengeful emotions into these superpowers, tracks down Queen of Fables and Harley and the gang and says, you've created me. I'm Mr. Praxis and I'm here to avenge my family.
Right.
In a way, Queen of Fables then becomes she's right. She's right. This is what happens when you're a villain. You have to clean up. You have to make sure that you don't leave anything unattended, anything that could potentially come to get you later. And this is how that manifests.
Well, and there's a moment at the end when Praxis is saying, look, I'll let the rest of you survive if you let me kill Queen of Fables. And he eliminates the book from her hand so she can't use that against him. Dr. Psycho creates a telepathic shield around the group of them to protect them. And he simply says, as long as you let her come out of the shield and let me get my revenge on her, the rest of you will survive. And Harley says, okay, deal. And grabs her, moves her beyond the shield and says, okay, here she is. And you start to think, okay, she has maybe crossed that line a little bit. She's willing to let someone die in order to help the others survive. Although one could say that that's also the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, which can be argued to be a good thing. Praxis fires his lightning. It backfires because Harley has put a force field watch, sort of wrist device, onto the Queen of Fables and explains, look, you're still my friend. I just don't want to work with you. I'm not going to let you die just to help us. So she reveals that she has not succumbed to this lesson. And then that's when she says, I'm a bad guy, but I'm not a bad person. And Queen of Fables is then able to just leave. Although she does say, you're going to regret letting me simply walk out of here, right before she then kills Praxis. And by she, I mean Queen of Fables comes back, stabs Praxis through the neck / it comes out of his mouth with her spear. And it's like, yeah, I told you, I got to take out the bloodline, and I almost forgot him. And then she leaves. So now she's out there in the world.
Well, and I want to say that they've had a long relationship. This is someone who mentored Harley and who gave her advice, and hopefully this reconciles any bad blood. Gosh, that's too accurate of a term for this, but hopefully she's not out there with a vendetta against this team. But all in all, I think if I were to lean back a little bit and think about the episodes we've covered, there is incremental development with Harley. This is yet another example of an experience that allows her to certainly repair the harm that the Joker's done and think about even more, like, do I want to be like the Joker? Do I want to be like Queen of Fables? What makes me, not only what makes me different, but what makes me stand out as having something valuable? So different doesn't just mean different than them, but different can mean I have something to offer in this society, in the landscape of villains, in this social justice system. Like, who am I? What role do I have here?
Yeah.
And it reminded me, I know we've talked a lot about certain ideas. We've talked about resilience. We've talked about grit. We've talked about post-traumatic growth, especially when we think about Batman basically learning from his trauma. With Harley, I think about self-determination a lot. Self-determination is exactly what it sounds. It's a state of mind. It's something you can build, something you can practice. It's not like you have it or you don't. So for my psych folks out there, like, it's not necessarily a trait.
Right.
It's more a state. So a trait would be something a little bit more fixed. And I'd say it's somewhere in the middle because you have to learn it and curate it and cultivate it. But self-determination is basically the sense that you have some control over outcomes. You have some influence over what happens to you. And the important pieces of this is, or rather are these three ideas: competence, connection, and autonomy. Competence, of course, is the sense that, you're good at something.
Yeah.
Would you say that Harley is good at this? when I say this, I mean these
Crimes?
these crimes. Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I wouldn't. I mean, nothing has gone exceptionally well for her. She has bold, ambitious ideas. She is not yet experienced enough for me to call her competent at them yet. When she has succeeded, she tends to fail upward. She succeeds in spite of the
Right.
shortcomings of the plan, not because of the plan.
So what about connection? Would we say that she has some sense of connection to what we would normally say are like connections to good influences? And of course, here we're talking about villains.
That's an interesting one, because I would say technically, I mean, I realize that there should be a pretty straightforward answer to this, but I think that she's on the bubble here.
Yeah.
She has her connections with her group, but as we've seen, even in the last episode, she ignores their needs if it will help her achieve hers.
I think it's ongoing, right? Because when I
Yes.
say connection, we're talking about belongingness. We're talking
Yeah.
about healthy attachment. We're talking about like a sense of social support. And I'd say that she has that in this ragtag team.
Yeah.
I'd also say it's not certainly that healthy, which is kind of what you're
Yeah.
mentioning. Like sometimes it's a little bit transactional. Sometimes she forgets their needs.
And not necessarily reciprocal. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Poison Ivy is a really good connection for her. Someone who's
Right.
very grounded.
Yes.
And then what about the sense of real autonomy? So we mean with autonomy, we really mean like, do you feel you're in control, not only of your own behaviors, but a sense that you can take real direction, real action, and that you have influence on those outcomes.
I do think she fits into that category. I do think she sees herself as the leader of the gang, and as I said, the others will simply follow. So I do think she feels autonomy.
That's almost like her strongest,
yeah.
Area.
She's not lacking in confidence.
No, and certainly that's related to autonomy, just in the sense of, when she was with the Joker, she didn't have much autonomy. She
Right.
sort of had to do everything that he said. She wasn't really her own person.
Right.
He would characterize her and kind of impose her ideas about her personhood. And while it's still in development, I'd say this is one of her strongest features. She's able to have her own ideas and rely on her own ideas and like you said, feel confident in her ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Just like with this particular heist, she had an idea. She didn't even tell the other people what she was doing. She had an idea. She broke Queen out of Arkham Asylum. They banded together to get this particular, desirable object that, ultimately didn't help them in the end. But she really did drive the mission. She really does,
going so
put her
far
ideas
as
into
to
action.
The others didn't even help her break out Queen. So even while Poison Ivy was in the middle of giving her reasons why she might decide not to break her out, we then zoom out and realize Harley's already gone. And she's not even taking the group with her. Harley on her own went and made this decision. And so she had the full autonomy in that regard.
Yeah. Well, I always like to bring up this concept of self-determination in addition to the other things we talk about, like resilience, because it really relies on a person, especially if we're thinking of someone in therapy, to come up with examples and ideas about when they feel like they are in control of the outcome. What are the things that they can do? It takes them out of a sense of helplessness in some ways. It's very grounded and realistic, right? We're not talking about dreaming something up. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. It's not The Secret. Remember The Secret? Like, You're not just going to like wish something and put it on a board and think it's going to happen.
It's not wishing, Drea. It's manifesting.
I'm sorry. We got to do like have we done an episode on The Secret?
No.
We should watch the movie The Secret and then do it.
Should we?
Isn't it Katie Holmes in The Secret?
You would know more than I at this point.
I'm sort of making this up, and she plays.
If I see anything along those lines, I'm just using that remote and skipping right past it.
Well, I'm saying that because Katie Holmes is also a character in the Nolan series. So like maybe there's some connection to Batman. No, you're saying
That's
no.
a pretty far.
Yeah, it's above and beyond wishing something. Not that wishing something is harmful. Like it's always good to be positive.
By the way, you had the perfect, as you said, wishing.
Wishing.
It's basically Snow White's voice from the 1930s.
Really?
I'm wishing.
Well,
I
see
can't.
where-
I
see
can't
where that
actually
got-
use the real tune because then
Yeah.
I'll get called out
Yeah.
for copyright. But
And
go
you
back
know,
and-
you know what happened to her, right? Things didn't work out super great. So
they worked out just great at the end. She
got what she wanted.
alive and well and running the kingdom. She's good. I don't know what you're talking about. Sometimes the sleep is what you need. It's a little nap. You have an apple, then you take a nap for a little while, and when everything is rolled
Brian,
over,
she was poisoned.
when everything else has just happened, you wake up and you run the kingdom again.
Yeah.
So
Wouldn't that be so nice? You could just take a long rest.
just wake me
and all
up.
your hit points come back.
wake
you feel
me up
good.
when it's over. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say, look, it's not harmful to look. I'll even say this: making a vision board or manifesting, it only can be good for you in that you start to ideate, you start to think about the kinds of things that are important to you,
Yeah.
your values,
Make plans.
your wishes. But I would say, especially as a counselor, drive that forward a little bit. Go from manifesting to self-determination practices. Actually, consider and put into practice what are the kinds of things that you do have control over, and what are the things. Let's go back to those 3 ideas. How can you be what gives you autonomy? Whether you're thinking about your job, your personal life, your home life, what gives you a little bit of a sense that you're driving that story, you have that narrative, you can make your own choices. What are you competent in? What are the things that you feel you're especially good at, whether it's a talent or a skill, and how do you continue to hone in on that? And then I think the last one, which are relationships, relatedness is the word we say. How can you get support, connection, and belonging from people around you? And it relates to all of this because it means people see you and you are valued for who you are. That is one of the healthiest things we can find when we think about self-determination. Not only you're believing that you have control over the outcome, but other people also believe in you.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the B story here. This is Poison Ivy and her ongoing romantic relationship with Kite Man. I will not deny that this is the part that I find least believable, least entertaining. I almost, similar to the way you might, when we're watching TV shows like, dating reality series and, Married at First Sight, things like that. I may have just given away that we watch things like Married at First Sight.
I tell everyone I'm into relationship and dating reality TV. It's really good lean out TV.
Okay. So, in the same way that you might yell through the screen and be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm doing that with Kite Man. I should say I'm doing that with Poison Ivy regarding Kite Man. It's not that I think Kite Man is a bad guy. He's just a complete idiot and buffoon. And they're playing that well in that he believes that simply by wearing a kite on his back, he has superpowers, which obviously he does not. And she calls him out on that, but she finds it adorable. She comes right out and says, you're not the typical guy I would date, but for some reason I'm attracted to you. And my problem is none of the writing has steered us toward that. I don't think up to this point anybody's shipping the two of them. So, and I almost want there to be a clear reason why she would in any way associate with Kite Man.
I have many reasons why she might like him.
Go for it. He wears green?
No, I think he's I'll agree with you that he's not very intelligent, but I think he's very kind. He's very sweet. He gave her a dozen roses, and then she had an initial negative response, but then he clarified that he put them in a pot for her, like he repotted these roses to give to her. And so that was thoughtful. That shows that he knows her and what she cares about. I also find...
Was that the clarification? Did I miss that?
Yeah.
I thought for sure when she said, you do realize that's like giving me 12 baby heads. And I thought he said, and maybe I didn't read.
He said baby heads and baby bodies.
Yeah, baby heads on baby bodies. And then you see the stems, the long stems going into the pot. But he didn't also say, also there's this beautiful pot that I gave you. There was no clarification.
Her reaction
there.
Was like, oh,
she
know
acknowledged
me.
It was sweet. Yes.
And then the whole plot with these two is that, look, they're secretly hooking up.
Yeah. But she's embarrassed by him.
But she does not want to be seen in public with him. She has sunglasses and a scarf over her head when they're in public. She's uncomfortable going to his place.
Yeah.
It's clear that right now what she gets out of the relationship is more of a physical, and maybe there's something intimate there. Like maybe it's something about their time together that's not just the physical piece, but maybe she feels safe with him, or she feels like he's not very intelligent, but there's some sense of psychological safety with him because he genuinely likes her. He doesn't want anything out of her other than her companionship and intimacy, right? So there's nothing nefarious about this,
right?
That I'm gathering.
He's too simple for that.
He's very simple. When he goes out and he tries to take her out on dates, I thought that was very...
He specifically wants to take her to dinner. She wants to go to the movies so that they're in a dark place and can't be seen together. He wants to take her to dinner so that they can be seen together.
Well, not because he's trying to show her off or trying to
he is,
points.
but not for the same reasons.
Yeah,
to him,
I think
he's
he feels
proud
very special
to be with her.
He feels very special to be with her, and he wants to enjoy that out in public.
Yes.
And I'd say all of the bro things he does is performative. He's just kind of trying out these different sayings and trying to be, masculine or traditionally masculine, trying to be desirable. He's probably looks maxing when we're not around, doing some mewing in front of the mirror.
Some what?
Yeah, you got to listen.
Mewing?
Mewing.
Uh-oh.
You got to listen to all the episodes.
Of our show?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the looks maxing. I don't remember mewing.
Oh, do we not? So
specifically.
mewing, you know what it is. Mewing is taking that little piece of plastic and
we did
biting.
talk about the jaw thing, but we did. I didn't remember that there was a word associated with it. It's the little piece of okay.
He kind of seems like that guy. Like he's probably watching those TikTok videos and mewing in front of the mirror. But he ultimately, I think, is a good guy.
See, I don't think he's doing those things at all. I think he wants to do those things, but just doesn't.
Yeah.
Like that's how simple this guy is. So, when we talked about looks maxing, we talked about Maxi Zeus, that guy's definitely doing those things. This guy is the kind of guy who thinks those things are cool, but has never actually started to do them yet. But has it on his list too. Like that's the kind of person that Kite Man is. But the whole thing really comes around to a morality tale when it comes to her. The fact that he has given her no reason to be embarrassed by him, and she realizes she has hurt his feelings when he puts two and two together and realizes that these disguises are because of who he is and that she doesn't want to be seen with him. And that makes her then realize what she has. And so she goes and apologizes. It takes nothing to get him to accept that apology because, again, he is a very simple person. But it does give her a little bit of an opportunity to talk about the fact that she shouldn't have been judging him for all of these things. Meanwhile, I think she's okay to judge him for these things. He is kind of... He is not someone I would want her to hook up with. Like
who's a better match for Poison Ivy?
I feel like Poison Ivy deserves better. And that's because she has been positioned as our sort of proxy for the show.
Sure.
She is the one telling Harley good from bad. She is the one trying to steer her in certain directions. And then she goes off and starts making decisions that none of us would make. And so for me, I'm taken out of the episode for a little bit because I feel like my proxy is now betraying me. And maybe that just means I need to go through a little bit of talk about this. Maybe.
I think folks who are listening who have seen the series, they're telling us to give it time.
Oh, you know something I don't know.
Yes. This is not the person that Poison Ivy ends up with.
Oh, well, sure. But I'm in the moment, Drea. I'm in the moment. And let's also be clear. I'm not sure I agree with that either because I feel it's the exact same argument. Like, why are we doing this? Like, this is a bad decision. But that being said, I haven't seen it work out in the context of this show yet, so I can't talk about it. And maybe it's better. Maybe it's good. But that person as they are now, I also would yell at the screen and be like, "What are you doing, Poison Ivy?" Now we'll see how that person evolves between now and then. Drea, the first rule of our show is you can't talk about things that happen in the future.
I didn't talk about something that happened in the future. You
cannot allude to things happening in the future.
Well, you know, what we do, I appreciate that you're saying we're in the moment, but we also have to, in this work, it's important to predict and be prepared for what could happen.
Okay.
Otherwise, what is all of this for?
Okay. All right.
Right?
All right. So you're trying to save the future by living in the now and looking at the past and preparing for what that future might be. Understood. But how do you feel about the relationship in general? I revealed that I feel a little betrayed by it, but
With Kite Man?
Yeah, like how do you feel about those B scenes?
I think it's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
I don't find him undesirable. I don't find him annoying.
I mean, he's funny the way that he's supposed to be. I just don't think he's right for Poison Ivy.
I think he's endearing, and he's also trying to find his way. And I think I'm vulnerable for people who are trying to find their way.
Okay.
And who are trying. Like, at least he's putting effort into it.
Sure.
He's not trying to harm anyone. He's really just trying to be kind to Poison Ivy, to protect her, to love her.
Just trying to be the best Kite Man he can be.
Yeah. Now, where things can go, where it would make me dislike him, is when, and she's sort of done this in the past. If she has a line and says, you know, this is over, or I'm not interested in you anymore, he needs to accept that.
Yeah.
If he pushes that line or gaslights her or, you know, retaliates, then I will dislike him. But so far, he seemed to genuinely care about her.
Yeah. Okay. So where do we go from here, Drea? This was an entertaining episode, but I wouldn't necessarily say there was anything below the surface of what we were provided. It all seemed to be sort of in your face in this episode.
Yes, and as I said, with Harley especially, like, we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, she did not bring up Joker. To your point in a couple episodes ago, she did not bring up the Joker specifically as someone that she wanted to get back at. It became more about the Legion of Doom. She is shifting her priorities from her ex to this organization. Yeah. That's sort of becoming the obsession. So are you happier about that?
I am. I'd like to continue to see her not only reflect on these differences between her and these other villains, and again start to individuate a bit more and understand what is important to her, who is she in this world, but also I want that to be further developed around her trauma.
Yeah. So
how is she going to bring in her trauma recovery and repair into this story? I don't think a lot of people look for that. So, you know, I don't know how strong that theme will be. But this is an enjoyable, I looked at the year that this season came out. We're covering season 1 and it's 2020. And that's almost 5 years ago, which is just mind-blowing for me to think about. It seems like 2020 was just last
year. It was 5 years ago. We are in 2025 now.
We're in 2025.
Yeah, that was 5 years. You said almost 5 years ago.
It was 5 years ago.
It is 5 years ago. So yeah, it's even further than you thought just now. Yeah. Yeah, it's bizarre to think that the time has flown that by. And that there are so many seasons of this show when I feel like we were only like a season behind, it didn't occur to me that, wow, multiple seasons of this show have existed since we last watched it.
Yeah.
And I want to say, I can't remember. I think we finished all of season 1 when we first watched it, but I'm starting to recognize less and less as we move forward. So maybe we didn't. Maybe this is all new for at least me. I don't know. Are you excited about the next episode?
Yeah.
All right.
What's the next episode?
Don't know.
Oh.
Episode 8.
Great.
Episode 8. But that'll be coming up in 2 weeks. Until then, I want to remind folks that we are still running a benefit for the wildfire charities that are going on here in Los Angeles. Until the end of February, anyone who gives us money through Patreon by joining our Patreon or by buying one of the whatevers, there some posts can be sold. If you do any of that, any money that we get from Patreon or from our TeePublic site where you can buy our t-shirts or mugs or anything you want our logo to be on, all of that is going to 2 organizations. One of them is the Red Cross, and then the other one was the Humane Society Pasadena, specifically for both domesticated and wild animals that have been displaced and need food and shelter and medicine and water and whatnot. We will be splitting up those donations from January and February, so you've still got a little bit of time. We definitely want to be able to provide. And so far, I'm very happy to say that we have gotten people to join the Patreon, I believe, for this reason. So thank you for your support and for your help. We really appreciate that. If you want to join and help us donate, go to Arkham Sessions. Go to patreon.com/Arkham Sessions. Join any tier. Any amount of money that we have received in January and February will go to these 2 organizations. Otherwise, Drea, where can folks find you online?
Well, I want to plug an appearance I made on a podcast that's part of the Nerds of Color series of podcasts. They have a whole network of podcasts.
Yeah.
And I guested with Keith Chow on the DC Multicast podcast. We covered the film Batman Forever, which is, as everyone knows, one of my favorite Batman movies. Because
if you haven't heard our episode on it, go back and listen.
There's a psychologist in this Batman movie, so
she's a horrible psychologist.
She's great, but
she is unethical at best.
So if you want to hear us talk about that, our episode is episode 200 of the Arkham Sessions, where we cover Batman Forever.
Yeah.
You can hear more of a deep dive on the DC Multicast, which you can find at the Nerds of Color.
By the way, that
website.
200th episode is the one that we watched the movie live with our Discord.
That's correct.
We should do that again very soon.
I would love to do that again. And,
I'm sorry, but I interrupted you. You were talking about the Nerds of Color podcast.
Yes.
And,
yeah. So I encourage folks to go to their entire network of podcasts. They have a bunch of different channels and really cool topics. What Keith is doing over there right now is he's resuscitating a series that he did where he covers all of the DC live action films, like from 1966, right? From your era. I don't mean your era. I mean like movies that you saw when you were a kid.
From 1966?
Yeah, like Batman 66.
Oh, got it.
So
okay.
that's where it all starts.
Sorry, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, and then it goes into, of
Superman.
course, the 80s. Yeah, 70s and 80s. So that was all being covered, and they're picking up the series with the Keaton and Kilmer Batmans. So,
okay.
Yeah. So I think...
and Clooney will be after that.
And Clooney, which they've covered, right. So if you're interested in that, go check it out.
Okay.
I had a blast on the show. I also just want to take a moment to thank our Discord members and the couple of new members we had, especially if Patreon is not your financial option right now. If you aren't able to spend money on podcasts, we totally understand. Our Discord is absolutely free. It's a community. Also, by the way, that doesn't mean that folks on Discord are not also on Patreon. There's a little bit of mixing, but certainly everyone is welcome to join our Discord channel. What you do is you go to our Instagram bio and just click on the link. You'll be invited. And we are there regularly talking about these different episodes and other DC and comic related things. It's a nice community. Everyone's welcome to join us.
Amazing. Otherwise, where can they find you online?
They can find me on my website, drdreapsychology.com, and on socials at Dr. Drea Psychology.
You can find me on Instagram. I am at B_Ward028. You can find us both as the Arkham Sessions on Instagram at the Arkham Sessions. Come find me on Blue Sky. Come find me on Threads. Join our Facebook. And again, patreon.com/Arkham Sessions. Join our family over at Fanbase Press. And I want to thank some of the patrons who have made this episode and all of our episodes possible, starting with Abby, Nutsy, Aaron Wenrick, Mike Ficklin, Lindsay B., Dr. Jerome Anderson, Antonio Lopez, Kevin Ortel, Todd Stashwick, Heroes Journey Fitness, Trevor Schwartz, Mark Pepper, Frank Muller, Swara Salih, Jamiroquai J., Peter, SK, John Henry, Carl Ward. Thank you all for helping us. And thank you for your donations. I think that's it. Till next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
Wishing.
So what did I miss? Oh my God, a lot I guess.